The failure to act with sufficient ambition to avert the climate catastrophe will be the greatest moral failure of our time.
Making changes takes courage, and if we don't change things, we won't have a future.
I'm an environmentalist. A lot of people don't understand that. I think I know more about the environment than most people.
You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. Change is coming, whether you like it or not.
Zero Carbon
Eastall. Hello and welcome to Zero Carbonista. I'm Ian Collins, but that is largely an irrelevance. This series of podcasts is essentially about the views, thoughts, campaigns and ideas of one man and various guests along the way. Dale Vince is an entrepreneur who's built his success in the green energy sector. He's the owner of Ecotricity. That's the world's first green energy company, an area he identified years before this kind of stuff was on the political agenda, let alone dominating world events as it seems to be now. He actually built his first windmill in 1996. In addition to all of that, he's the man behind Forest Green Rovers, the world's first vegan football club, where he sits as the chairman. On each episode, we'll be bringing you the salient issues from the biggest agenda on the planet right now, the environment and climate change. I mentioned we should clear this up first of all, Dale. Forest Green Rovers, top of the league. I mean, you can't be complaining much at the moment.
Well, I don't complain much anyway. That's not in my nature. But I get what you mean.
For those who don't know, what is how do you define a vegan football club?
All it really boils down to is that all of the food that we provide to anybody, our players, our staff, our fans, is vegan. It's as simple as that. So the food that we have responsibility for is plant-based, animal-free.
And one assumes that what follows from that is, infrastructure and building of stadium and the like is all with that in mind, with the environmental agenda in mind as well.
Yeah, that's right. We've got an organic pitch and solar panels, electric car charging points, wildlife areas around the ground, that kind of stuff. We've done as much as we can in the location that we inherited, so it's kind of like a retrofit scenario. But we've got a new build project planned, a place we call Eco Park.
Okay.
It's a 50-hectare site on Junction 13 of the M5, and we've had a new stadium designed for us by Zaha Hadid's practice. It'll be the first in the world to be made entirely out of wood, and it's beautiful as well. So we'll get the chance to really push the boundaries of sustainable development in this new location and push ourselves up the leagues. Our ultimate aim is to get to the championship.
On the last episode, we talked a lot about Extinction Rebellion. Those protests are largely on hold at the moment. I don't want to say over because that makes it sound like they're never going to happen again. But of course, there was that 2-week period. There was the point of various cities around the world all simultaneously showing political masters around the globe what they thought, lack of action, etc. Extinction Rebellion aren't going away, Dale. Of course, you'd expect there to be more of the same sometime soon.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, stuff that we haven't seen yet will come sometime soon. I mean, Extinction Rebellion like to move it up and innovate. So,
are you part of them, or are you a sympathiser of, a contributor of ideas? Where are you in terms of the XR picture?
XR is a movement, as I understand it, without a clear hierarchy or leadership, and I would count myself as part of that movement.
Okay. Let's talk about your own manifesto, as it were. Am I right in using the word manifesto here? I mean, are you what are you looking to do with this? Where are you looking to go with your own sort of thoughts and pillars of direction?
I think it's a reasonable way to describe it. I was saying to you on previous episode that raising the issue of the climate crisis, as XR and Greta and the school strikes have done, is fantastic, but we do need a coherent plan behind that and a government that picks that up and runs with it. And we've spent a lot of time in this space since the early 90s. We focused on energy at that time as the single biggest cause of climate change, and then in the early 2000s we looked around for the second biggest and third biggest respectively, found that they were transport and food, and that between the three of them, energy, transport and food, 80% of everybody's personal carbon footprint can be found. And that became the kind of the core of our approach to life, our manifesto, if you like. So what we've done at Forest Green, for example, is to focus on energy, transport and food. We use that as a blueprint or a universal slide rule. You can hold it up to any individual's life. You can hold it up to any organization of any size, any sports club. And you'll find that you cover most of the problems in those three areas. If you look at how you power yourself, how you travel, and what you eat. So our manifesto really kind of springs from that. What policies do we need? What do we need to change in those 3 areas of life? And it's actually really brutally simple. We need to move from being powered by fossil fuels to being powered by renewable energy. We need to stop being transported by internal combustion engines. We need to electrify transport, and we need to take animals out of our diet completely. We do those 3 things and we'll have gone nearly all the way to tackling this problem. We'll be 80% of the way there.
I mean, let's have a look at some of those in a bit more detail then. Travel being the obvious one. We know we're constantly seeing stories of, for some reason, the royal family sprung to mind because, we know that they, on some occasions, some members of the royal family have, talked out about climate change, about how it needs to be further up the agenda and, trying to be carbon neutral and the like. And then you have a little look and you think, well, they've been travelling on quite a lot of planes recently, which seems to slightly go against the grain of things. Is that straightforward hypocrisy, or is there sometimes an inevitability about that you've kind of, and if you're spreading the message, that's an offset in itself?
Yeah, it's interesting because I bumped into this problem myself before, as you might imagine. I'm very much against flying, but very much for spreading this message. And in September, I was invited to go to Switzerland twice, once to speak to the UN and another time to speak to UEFA on this subject, how we engage sport in the fight against climate change. I work with the UN on that program. And I really didn't want to fly. The train trip was going to take 3 days, and the 2 events were a week apart. I couldn't combine them, so it was going to be 6 days out of my month traveling for a couple of 1-hour slots, which wasn't very appealing either. And we arrived at a really great solution using technology. We took part by video. I shot little videos in each case by way of a kind of introduction to take part in the sessions, and then took part live by video and explained actually that a big part of my message could be seen in the fact that I wasn't in the room, because it made no sense to fly to Switzerland to speak for 1 hour on the issues of climate change and how we need to change how we live.
Yes.
And that went down, I have to say, incredibly well. I mean, it was really embraced. UEFA to begin with were very disappointed that I wasn't going to come and didn't understand it. And within a week of talking about it, they saw it completely. Were really on board and said, actually, they got it, and it meant a lot to them. And so I think it's important that we all make changes in our own lives. There's no good us exempting ourselves from this, particularly people that are spokespeople or speak out on these issues. We can't say, we've got to make all of these changes, but I'm just going to fly across the world now to have a little chat. That makes no sense. In the same way that, you get some people saying, yeah, I get the need to fight the climate crisis, but I think it's okay to eat grass-fed beef. I think that'll be okay. They have a decent life, and it's not like farm intensively reared stuff. People that don't really embrace the change themselves and make the sacrifice.
What was interesting then, Dale, about being asked to give speeches, normally when they invite a guest somewhere, they always say we're delighted that they can be with us today, but they were delighted that you weren't with them on those days, because in fact, in order to hammer the point home, you not being there in fact was the greatest prong of your argument.
Exactly right. And UEFA didn't tell their audience I wasn't going to be there. They introduced me. They said, first we'll see this little video, and they showed the video, and then they said, oh well, that's it, and look, here he is. I was on the screen live. And we did a Q&A, and it was, as you say, the message was contained in the fact that I wasn't there.
Well, what about the overarching thing of flying? When you think of the human journey and innovation and man's contribution to engineering and everything we've done, a lot of people will be scratching their head thinking, hang on a second, have we really arrived at this point of the 21st century where I can't get on an aeroplane, I can't go to Ibiza for the weekend, I can't go and see my old, Auntie Flo in Sydney or something? That surely is something's gone wrong with the human journey when we are reversing this stuff.
Yeah, I think actually we don't have to give up flying completely. I don't see that necessarily as a need, but there's an awful lot we can do in terms of reducing flying. Flying for real purpose rather than just popping to Europe for a weekend and that kind of stuff. There was some data came out recently, and I think it said that 10% of people in Britain are taking 50% of the flights. So the idea that really cheap flights are supporting the less well off among us to have holidays in Europe that they otherwise couldn't afford is actually a false narrative from the airline industry, because of course they enjoy massive tax breaks. There's no duty on the fuel. You get duty free in the shops. I mean, you don't get that at bus stops and train stations, for example. And so there are these massive tax breaks to encourage flying on the premise that it's it does a social good, which is actually quite false.
In terms of the efficiency of or the damage, the environmental damage of an aeroplane, I mean, we could talk about electric cars, and that's an industry that's clearly flourishing and will only get bigger, and one has to say that's a good thing. Where's the science on flight? I'm not aware of an electric aeroplane, or certainly not a big 747 or something.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody is working on it. Where are we on that journey?
I think we're in the same place we were 10 years ago on cars. We built a car around about 10 years ago called the Nemesis, and we did it because I wanted a greener form of transport, and you couldn't actually buy an electric car in the world back then, and they were just a kind of crazy idea. And if you talk to people about electric cars, they would say, oh yeah, it'll be like a milk float, it'll be underperforming, underwhelming, kind of boring car. So we built a supercar, the Nemesis. It still holds the land speed record in Britain for electric cars. I think it's about 156 or something like that. And since then, all of the major manufacturers have piled in making cars, and it's just become a thing. Electric cars today are better than internal combustion engines to drive. The experience is fantastic, and there's probably 40 models on the market, more coming every day, and manufacturers are talking about the day when they stop making the internal combustion engine. That's coming.
Yeah, but there's still a carbon footprint associated with making electric cars, of course.
Yeah, of course. There's a carbon footprint associated with making anything, but it's very different to the internal combustion engine. So we're in the same place, I would say, roughly with aviation. So there are electric planes in the air. They're small two-seater, one-seater planes, but the big manufacturers, Boeing and Airbus, are talking about in the next 10 years having short-haul passenger flights on electric aeroplanes. That's where they see it being. So not yet the 747s, but short-haul passenger planes. But there's other ways we can tackle this issue as well. We need to fly less, and fly for meaningful reasons. I think we could make great reductions in our flying footprint if we just do that. Sure. And then there's a possibility to make aviation fuel from a carbon neutral source as well to mitigate that impact further. And gradually we'll see the replacement of jet turbines with electric turbines.
I guess when it comes to all of these things, somebody said to me recently when talking about what's an individual supposed to do when it comes to climate change, when it comes to caring about environmental issues, where we're likely to be inside this next decade, where we're told there's a sort of irredeemable tipping point around the corner. And the reply was interesting. We can't all do everything, but if we all did something, then you begin to change things.
Yeah, make a massive difference. I think the biggest things that we can all do individually are, firstly, switch to green energy to power our homes. I mean, that's either number one or number two in terms of cause of climate change in Britain right now, because it and transport are swapping positions as more renewable energy comes onto the grid. And the second biggest thing anybody can do is just give up meat and dairy. It's a massive thing, has a massive impact, but it's easy to do. And it's not a complicated thing. That too often the things that we need to do are very multifaceted, overlapping, complex, and a little bit daunting, I would say. Which is why we try to break it down into just energy, transport, and food. We say it's how you power your home, it is how you travel, and it is what you eat. Change those things, and 80% of the problems that you're causing will be resolved.
Yeah, I mean this highlights the point.
When you see those climate disasters, when you see people flooded out of their homes, when you see places turning into desert, when you see crops no longer being able to grow because it's too hot, when you see hurricanes intensifying and smashing everything up, 15% of that is because of what we're eating. Well, that alone is enough reason to change.
So just explain, Dale, if you would, having heard that and this whole conversation about things we can do, you would obviously like to see a vegan world, but quite a lot of people out there like burgers.
Yeah, I get that. But the amounts of meat eaten in, let's say, Western countries right now, let's focus on Britain, it's just never been bigger. in the last 50 years. It's grown exponentially since the end of the Second World War. It's not a natural part of our diet, which some people say that it is or want to think that it is. It's been driven by the abundance of cheap fossil fuels, by the creation of intensive animal farming, which is an absolute abuse of sentient creatures. It's done on a mind-boggling scale. Today, 3 million creatures in Britain will be slaughtered for food. It's 1 billion every year just in Britain. It's 70 billion across the whole planet, which I think is like 2,000 every second or something like that. It's being done at a massive scale. It's quite unnatural, and it's causing enormous climate impacts as well as incredible cruelty. If you see images inside factory farms and slaughterhouses and stuff like that, these are brutal short lives that these animals live, and they have feelings, they have emotions and all that kind of stuff. But on top of that, it's killing us because it's bad for our health. It's one of the biggest causes of heart disease, cancer and type 2 diabetes is this modern diet that's full of animal products. And so it's a great irony that people feel that they need to have this stuff when it's killing them, it's killing the planet and obviously killing animals, and we'd be so much better off without it. One of the great beauties for me of this transition we need to make on the energy, transport and food front is if we all go plant-based, we free up 75% of the land that we currently farm in Britain. It becomes free. We don't need it. We can give it back to nature. And there's been this massive decline in nature in Britain. We focus on the rainforest and we bemoan, the lack of stewardship of that. But we've destroyed our own rainforest here in Britain, but we can bring it back. If we go plant-based, we can absolutely bring it back. And we can use this land, this massive amount of land, as a carbon sink for that irreducible part of our carbon footprint as a country that we really can't get at, which the Climate Change Committee estimate to be 2 or 3%. All of the things we need to do join up like some magic jigsaw puzzle. And at the end of it, we haven't just fought climate change, we've brought wildlife back to Britain, we've cleaned up the air and the water and the land, and we're living in some kind of ecotopia.
Just before we finish, I think it's if it's all right with you, Dale, can we have a Trump moment? Is that
yeah,
okay?
we can have a Trump moment. Yeah.
Let's have a listen to the genius himself.
The stable genius.
From day one, my administration has made it a top priority to ensure that America is among the very cleanest air and cleanest water on the planet. We want the cleanest air. We want crystal clean water. For years, politicians told Americans that a strong economy and a vibrant energy sector were incompatible with a healthy environment. In other words, one thing doesn't go with the other, and that's wrong, because we're proving the exact opposite.
You said it on the last episode, the gift that keeps on giving. Just explain where... I mean, that's the president, of course, one of the most powerful men in the world. Let's just remind ourselves of that. Every now and again, you sort of have to. Where are America on these issues of climate change and the environmental agenda?
It depends on what you judge to be America. Obviously, if you're talking about the White House, then they're completely on the wrong side of the debate, talking about pulling out of Paris, cranking up the fossil fuel industries, and all that kind of stuff. But if you look at the state level, look at what California are doing, for example, and some of the other major states and cities, they're going in the opposite direction. They're saying whatever Trump says or does doesn't matter to them. They get the need to act, and they're getting on with it.
I guess there's a use there, isn't there? Because you could use that it's quite a good yardstick. So if he says something is okay, then you could just kind of work on the basis that therefore it probably isn't.
Yes.
There is a use for him after all.
Yeah, and maybe, he's a great stimulator as well, because he's like an irritant. He comes along and he says, fracking's good and oil and gas is good, let's drill in the Arctic. Sure. And he stimulates people that otherwise might have been quite relaxed in the Obama era or something like that, to get off their butts and say, this isn't good enough. We've got to stop this man.
Dale, we'll speak on the next episode.
Thank you.
And that's it for this episode. Don't forget, of course, you can subscribe for free from your podcast provider so that you get each new episode automatically. Do leave a review there as well. Here's the important bit. Do make sure you follow Dale Vince on social media. That'll be on Twitter @Dale Vince or Facebook.com/Dale Vince. We'll see you on the next episode.